Good to go.
Okay. Good morning, people, and thank you for being present for the Finance Committee meeting of the 25th of May. I will just start with apologies. I have apologies recorded for Councillor Hope, Councillor Laws, and Councillor Calvert.
Is that being live streamed yet? If it's got that up on the screen, just checking. Sorry.
Yes, it is.
It's underway. So someone move in that direction. Moved by Andrew, seconded by Gretchen. All those in favour?
Aye.
We have by Zoom. Thank you, Councillor Deaker. We have on Zoom Councillor Deaker, Mr. Donnelly, and other staff as we go through the agenda. We also have a public forum today on our 2022-23 annual plan, and that will include the Mayor, Dunedin City Council, Federated Farmers, Mr. Simon Davies and Eleanor Linscote, and we have the Queenstown Lakes District Council, Chief Executive Mike Thielen, and also from the Tyree, Mr. Simon Park. So we will go straight on to that agenda and welcome Mayor Hawkins, who is on Zoom. And Liz, if you could let him in.
It takes just for that. You should be there. So let him know you're ready for it. He's on.
Set if you're ready, Mayor Hawkins.
Kia ora. Yes, one moment. Just want to make sense. I'm trying to make sense of the council chamber split screen, but that's
Good luck.
thanks. Is it different angles of the same room?
Yeah.
All right.
The floor is yours.
Kia ora tātou. Ka mihi nui kia koutou, and I acknowledge the people of Kaitahu, Waitaha and Katimamoi as mana whenua of this fine district that I'm fortunate enough to represent in Otapoti, Dunedin. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. A small but illustrious list of oral presentations to submissions before you on your annual plan. And I'll take the submission as read, you'll be pleased to know, and just want to make a few brief comments in support of that. And I want to start by thanking the Regional Council for the work that you are doing, both at a governance level and a staff level, in supporting areas of work where we have shared objectives. And while there will always be a degree of tension between the two organisations, whether that's through the planning hierarchy or through various regulatory functions, I think there is much to be made of areas where we have common goals and can achieve more than the sum of our parts for those in our district. And we've highlighted some of those in our submission. You know, the biodiversity outcomes that come with the work we're doing through the Predator-Free 2050 campaign. Obviously, civil defence and emergency management, which we know is only going to become increasingly important for our district in a less stable climate. And most notably, and related to that, is the work on South Dunedin Future, which is a significant and ambitious body of work which requires significant attention, and we have very strong relationships at an officer level between the two organisations, and I think a growing shared understanding at a governance level of the work that's happening, and recent briefings and discussions that we've had have been helpful to that end. And so those are fine examples of what we can achieve together. South Dunedin Future obviously is focused on climate adaptation, and we know that in the longer term, the most effective method of adaptation is mitigation, and that is the zero carbon transition, and we can't do that as a city and as a country without rethinking how our transport network operates and shifting the way that we move people and goods through the district and between districts, which is relevant obviously to the regional council as the governor of our public transport system. The city's position on public transport governance has been well canvassed, and I won't bore you with that at this point. But what we know we need is a public transport system that is more flexible and more ambitious and more responsive in its planning. And I acknowledge that there are impediments to that in the way that the public transport operating model is set up. But I also think that we can mitigate some of that, I think, by doing the planning work around what it is that our district needs and deserves. And by way of one example, when the government announced that they were overnight halving the cost of public transport fares for a period of 3 months, the messaging was in Dunedin, bus fares are half price, please don't use them at peak times because we have capacity issues. And leaving aside the question of, well, if we know we have capacity issues, when are we going to plan to increase capacity? We need to be able to think. We need to be able to respond to those sorts of changes in direction out of Wellington in a way that encourages more people to use our bus service. And we are happy to support that. And there doesn't appear to be an appetite to shift the governance of this service at this point. So you will have seen the correspondence from myself and Mayor Bolt asking for, well, if that isn't the option, then what are the alternative options that allow our districts to have a greater degree of input into decision making? Just one aside really around the bus fares, and some of you will recall submissions we made around the ORC's flat fares for the bus service. The government, as anticipated, did extend or has extended the half price fares regime for all users for 2 months, and then for community service card holders from August onwards indefinitely, which leaves us in a somewhat perverse situation where from August it will be cheaper for an adult with a community services card to use the bus service than a child, because the community service card concession fare will be $1 and the child's fare will be $1.20. And while I'm disappointed that children weren't included in the government's plans, I think there's an opportunity for us to remedy that, and I'd encourage the ORC to give serious consideration to reducing the children's fare to bring it in line with the community services card concession. And I acknowledge that this is all very new to all of us, and we haven't had as much time as we would like to think about how we go about doing this, but it does seem to be a perverse outcome. Just one other point around, and I appreciate that this has been subject to a hearing recently through a different process, but we are very supportive of active transport, not just for commuters, but for recreational users, and encourage you to take an enabling approach to off-road cycle trail development, where people are looking to use stop banks and other land for that purpose. But I don't want to compromise anybody who's been involved in that bylaw hearing process, but it is included in our submission. And just lastly, really, is a note around the willingness of the city to be involved in the Otago Harbour, or management of the Otago Harbour and Otago Harbour assets, where there is an obvious link between our two jurisdictions above and below mean high water springs. And we appreciate that you're operating within a constrained financial environment and can't do everything. And we've made the point previously and reiterated it again around a disappointment around the air quality improvement program. We're happy to take some work off you in the form of the public transport system, if that makes it easier. But these are difficult times for all of us, I think, to try and navigate, and all strength to your arm as you go through your deliberations process. And that's all I feel the need to add at this point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Mayor Hawkins. I'll just now open to questions. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm just looking at your submission on the urban water quality data and the 2000. So I've got terrible feedback. Am I better without that? Can you hear me without my mic on, Aaron?
I could hear you before and I can hear you now. So that's
I'm getting terrible feedback. That's why I just won't use it. Sorry. The urban water quality data one is an interesting one, and the assets that the DCC has over some waterways where they've been piped. Say, for example, I think Kaikarai is hidden in some of the land for Belmac reserves, and is it Ellis Park or Fraser at the bottom of Fraser Gully? One of those sort of things. Is it when you submit on this, which is more about the monitoring, but are you up for a discussion about freeing some waterways from pipes to activate them again to be part of the environment?
Without making commitments that I don't have any mandate for, I don't see why there would be any conversation that we wouldn't want to have. I mean, we have a fairly limited window at the moment around being able to make any of those sorts of decisions around how our water infrastructure is planned and how those services are delivered. So, if that was a conversation that the region wanted to have, then that would be something that you'd want to do sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. You said that the DCC wants to be involved in the Otago Harbour assets, and I think you left it at that. Can you flesh that out a bit, please?
The submission speaks to an interest that we have in a reserves management plan for the Otago Harbour, but we're just conscious that there are assets on both sides of the fence, if you like, that obviously interact. And there was a forum back in 2017 as part of the Heritage Festival, I think, where high-level commitments were made to work together on how we manage the Otago Harbour, and really all this is just reiterating our interest in being involved in those discussions.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Thank you. And I must say, I also enjoyed the briefing on South Dunedin. It was great to see governance of both councils working constructively together, and I look forward to more of that.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor, Mayor Hawkins. Sorry, I don't want to demote you. Mayor, look, thanks very much for your very, very positive submission, and really the intent there for increased collaboration and ensuring that we're working together to get the very best results for the area. So thanks for the submission, and I'm sure we'll take that on board as we deliberate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Davies and Ms. Longstaff.
Can I ask
Councillor Wilson.
process question? There are some issues that are coming up about our next week's deliberations. If we've got any questions of staff, will we have time to collaborate the questions? Because I may have questions.
Sorry, could you start again? I just missed that.
There may be some questions that come up today that have some impact on our deliberations next week. He's just spoken to an annual plan submission.
Yes.
If we want to ask questions of staff, there's no point us asking questions if they're not supported by everyone. But will we have a time frame before next week to ask some of those questions collaboratively together?
I was anticipating that we would slot these submissions into our round of submissions that we do on the first and second. So there will be time at that stage to ask those questions. Okay. If you have questions now, I think if you aimed in at the appropriate director would be no problem. But I think we'll definitely have this will not be the only time that we consider these public submissions. We will have time. Yeah, no, that's fine. I just, if there were questions that had to be. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Welcome, Simon. Welcome, Eleanor. On behalf of Federated Farmers, we have a 5-minute slot here for you to go through your submission. You can take it as read. Everyone's read the submission, so the floor is yours, and we may have some questions at the end. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Hey, look, thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity. I actually thought I'd done my last one of these, but there you go. And also, I apologise for not being in person, but I made the call last night. There was a bit going on farm, and I'm very pleased I did make that decision when I did. So, look, obviously, I represent Otago Federated Farmers. We believe we have a very good relationship with the ORC and staff, and we would like to continue that, obviously. I'm not going to read through my submission, but rather just make some more specific comments regarding particular pieces of it. So I'll get into it. So in terms of rates increases are inevitable, as with all costs, and they will rise. However, given that inflation is at 7%, which in itself is a historic high, the 18% proposed increase for this year is pretty big. Yes, there are a number of reasons for this, which we can't really dispute. However, given that the ORC does have some reserves, some substantial reserves, I believe, and a dividend stream from Port Otago, which in itself has also had record profits, one has to question why ratepayers are being asked to foot this massive increase. We would ask why Port Otago profits or reserves could not be used to soften this increase a bit. Particularly given that farmers and indeed all ratepayers are facing significant increases in costs of doing business and living. And this level of rates increase is going to hurt all. In terms of regional planning, look, Otago Federated Farmers has serious concerns with the timetable and potential costs of the new RPS. A rush process does not usually result in a good outcome, but it does come with a large price tag. We just have to look at how Plan Change 8 has gone through. The outcome is challenging and of little value as it's yet to be operative, and I understand that might change in a day or two. And it will be superseded by the new RPS. And given our calculations, the price tag for Plan Change 8 is going to be pretty eye-watering. In development of the regional policy statement, it is for the benefit of Otago and will be paid for by Otago ratepayers. Therefore, the process must be for the benefit of Otago rather than Wellington-based central government. There will be the usual expectation of environmental concessions expected of farmers. These concessions will come at a cost. Given the general sentiment of farmers and the massive compliance costs already being faced, Federated Farmers is deeply concerned that the farmer wellbeing and financial viability will be compromised with a poor process leading to poor and/or inappropriate outcomes. Ironically, this type of process has been rather spectacularly played out in Sri Lanka, where we have a country now facing starvation through making completely ill-informed decisions with a next to no process. I obviously don't expect such extreme consequences. However, poor outcomes from the RPS will definitely increasingly drive land use change from pastoral farming to forestry. Finally, I want to emphasise this is not about slowing the process, but ensuring Otago gets good outcomes and an RPS document that is fit for purpose and endures the test of time. In terms of flood protection and drainage and river management, it was noted that the ORC would inform affected communities within a 3-month timeframe. Federated Farmers feels that 3 months is not really timely, and it would rather that the affected communities should be kept up to date with developments and or be part of the process to resolve issues. And now just a few general comments. Look, Federated Farmers supports Otago's civil emergencies management work. We also support the initiatives for landowners of community-led projects promoting best practice land management for soil, water and biodiversity, resulting in better environmental outcomes. Federated Farmers supports the ORC initiatives that aid and facilitate catchment groups. Federated Farmers believes catchment groups are a direct and powerful means of engagement with rural communities on environmental projects that align directly with what the needs are of the community. Catchment groups act like an umbrella organisation for side projects involving schools, investigating opportunities to improve Indigenous biodiversity. The Council should consider investing more into the Catchment Community Initiative and all other funding opportunities should be supported where they cover new ideas to improve Indigenous biodiversity. Given the situation that the ORC is now recruiting for a new CEO, Federated Farmers believes there's an opportunity to move the ORC into a more commercially minded organisation. By ensuring the ORC has a more commercial focus on operations, Federated Farmers believes there will be better value for money, value for money outcome for all Otago ratepayers. Therefore, Federated Farmers encourages the governors of the ORC to look to engage a commercially minded CEO. With step changes in staffing levels at the ORC, particularly in the consents and compliance area, Federated Farmers would again like to offer support or assistance in any way possible to the ORC to help these staff increase knowledge and understanding and the complexities and diversity of Otago farming systems and practical on-the-ground solutions that involve a number of environmental issues. I know the initiative last year to get ORC staff onto farms was both beneficial and well received. Finally, Federated Farmers will continue to participate in and be available to the ORC as a key stakeholder on all relevant topics. And finally, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. Again, apologise for not being in person, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Simon, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Simon. Just checking, when you talk about commercial operations, are you talking about, for example, predator work actually being the ones that undertake it? Is that where you're getting to in that sense, or?
No, not really. I'm just trying to, along the lines of running the organisation with a commercial mindset.
Okay.
In terms of perhaps less bureaucratic mindset and more commercial mindset, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay. And the other question, you talked about eye watering for Plan Change 8. Are you talking about the effects of Plan Change 8 for farmers with the effluent testing and everything, or the cost of the process?
The actual cost of the process. We were led to believe it was going to be faster and cheaper, and we suspect that it was not particularly fast, but more importantly, it won't be particularly cheap.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Simon, Eleanor, look, thanks for taking the opportunity and the time to present to us today. Particularly note paragraphs 23 and 24, where Federated Farmers are offering the support to share knowledge and understanding of the complexities and diversity of Otago farm systems, and with the potential of assisting for better environmental outcomes. So look, it's very good for you to offer that support, and we'll take note of that and take note of your submission as we go through. Thanks for your time, and we might see you again next year.
I know, thank you all, and I hope it goes well. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Now on,
I have admitted Mr. Phelan.
we should have on coming through now from Queenstown Lakes District Council, CE Mike Thielen.
Might not be aware. Do you want to go to the next gentleman?
Is Simon available?
Yes, they're all on.
Right, we've got a delay with Mike. So what? That's Mike
There
there.
he is.
That's Mike. Well done. Morning, Mike. Kevin Malcolm here. We're all set for your submission. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin, and morning, councillors and staff. So, firstly, apologies from Mayor Jim Bolt. Jim's is unavailable, so I'm just really going to canvass off the QRDC submission. I'm not going to speak to it in detail. You've had the opportunity to read it. I'll just touch on those key points. And then happy to answer any questions. So firstly, really happy to be able to present the submission. And I think our overall position as a council is to continue to seek the opportunity to work closely and collaboratively with ORC on a range of matters that obviously we share a common interest in, even though in some instances we have a slightly different role to play. So we touched on a number of points in the submission. If I turn to Lake Hayes, really our focus there is on simply encouraging the ORC to continue to work closely with ourselves, with Whakatahi, with iwi, with some of the local communities to really prioritise the rehabilitation of the water body. Lake Hayes is a very significant resource. It's not simply a local resource, it's very much a key recreational resource for the whole of the Wakatipu Basin, simply if only because it's much more swimmable and warmer than Lake Wakatipu itself. So restoring that key health is something that I think we've all prioritised and really encourage the ORC to continue to work proactively with us on that. Turning to air quality, this is one that I think is well known to you, and particularly the air quality in and around Arrowtown is a challenge. Whenever the Mayor or I meet with representatives of the Arrowtown community, look, we're often challenged by them around air quality. And we also know equally that as much as they want to have better air quality, that they also want to have the flexibility to use log burners and other things which actually contribute to their own sort of environmental situation. We're concerned that the air quality program for Arrowtown has slipped, and we'd really like that to be re-brought back into year 2 of your LTP, because you've currently proposed to push it out to year 3. We also realise it's a real challenge because we don't want, while it would seem that relying on electrical heating is probably the long-term goal, we do acknowledge that that's not an easy transition for some communities to make. And in our submission, we encourage ORC to do some work on modern standards for high-quality, efficient wood-burning solutions. And obviously, there's a lot of work out of Canterbury, which has done similar work there in that part of the country. Natural hazards and emergency management, we're very grateful and continue to support the regional delivery of emergency management services, and are very pleased with the increased funding that has gone into there in your current AP. We want to congratulate your team on the work that in the natural hazards team, and particularly the work they're doing at the head of the lake in Glenorchy. But we also want to, I suppose, reinforce that there are other key areas in the hazardscape which also need similar levels of investment and collaboration with us. So in particular, work around the Gorge Road alluvial fan risk in Queenstown, which is a major hazardscape for the community, but also the increasing issues of wildfire risk, both around Queenstown and Luggett and Wanaka. So we think that's a great model that has been adopted for the natural hazards team. We'd just like to see that continue to be rolled out in a very collaborative fashion. Public transport is a key issue, and I think I can spot Councillor Forbes there on one side of the table. Yes. Hello, Alexa. Look, we've banged on around public transport for many years, and obviously we collectively had some great success with the $2 bus and the single fare for Queenstown, at least pre-COVID. Our biggest request is to see that that continued investment in public transport, particularly aligned with the work on urban growth, and in particular both the Southern Corridor and the Ladies Mile Corridor, where we think there's a real opportunity with really lead investment to really start to shape people's behaviour around how they travel. I was tempted to bring Councillor Wilson's book on Better by Bus and wave it in front of her to show that I've still got it. But that does tell us quite clearly that the patterns of public transport and the patterns of the way we move set very early in people's thinking about how and when they move into a new area to live. So unfortunately, the model, and I know it's not the ORC model, but it's the model we tend to have to work with, is very much driven by, we'll get around to delivering the bus services once there's enough houses and demand in there. And I think that's the wrong way to go. And particularly when we think that transport is one of the highest emitters of carbon in our country. So continue to encourage and really encourage the ORC to really take a proactive and an investment-led approach to public transport. And in that vein, the council wants to express its disappointment that the trial for public transport in the Upper Clutha was defunded. Look, we've got a very strong community up in the Upper Clutha. It's actually growing faster than the Wakatipu community as a proportion. It's still smaller. But equally, as we see the likes of growth happening in Hawea and in Luggett, in 3 parks, with the prospect of a major employment node around the Silverlight Studio heading out towards the airport, we think it's timely that as the public transport lead, we start to see some initiatives and some testing of opportunities for public transport in the Upper Clutha. It's, again, along with walking and cycling, that's a key message we often hear from our own community up there, and we'd really encourage you to put the money back in to enable that to happen. Finally, just want to touch on the issue of regional leadership. Look, along with ourselves and the other TLAs, obviously, Three Waters reform, RMA reform, Future for Local Government reform, and many other reforms touch very, very solidly into the lives of the ORC and QLDC and other councils. And again, we're really supportive of continuing to tackle those collaboratively, using our joint resources to do so, but also continue to look for ways to collaborate, consolidate, and create efficiencies. And one of the really great examples of that is the continued contribution by both your staff and now your elected members into the Whaiora Grow Well partnership. So having both political and technical staff working with us on that major spatial planning exercise is a real benefit, I think, for both parties, and it's a model that we would like to encourage your continued support for and contribution to. So, Chair, that quickly sums up what I think QLDC had in its main submission. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Wilson.
2 questions. I'm actually going to go to that last one first about regional leadership. And one of my frustrations at the beginning of this term was getting a triennium agreement that I think was more ambitious and focused. And whether that is something that we should be trying to do now to give to as a suggestion to the next councils, because at the moment it's a fairly, it's not a particularly focused document. I mean, I appreciate the mayor's task, the mayors work really well together and chairs, but it's not a particularly ambitious triennium agreement. It's not clear what you may end up with. Would that be something that we could be doing before?
I think it's, Councillor Wilson, I think it's certainly something that's on the mayoral forum work program ahead of obviously the conclusion of this term. But I think if there's a enthusiasm to do so, I think the mayors would be up for a much more in-depth discussion about that. And my apologies for not recognising you at a distance. I do still have your book.
You can keep it. You can keep it. I'll get another one. It's worth sharing. And the only other question is, has if I may, has QLDC and or CODC done any surveying on the demand or potential for PT up there? We tend to do surveys of users rather than the potential, and that's not a negative. It's just the reality. We've got a lot of other work we have to do. And I'm just wondering, is there any data that shows that what the demand may be like?
I don't, in honesty, I don't know that we've done any formal survey work. We certainly, it is a constant theme that people want to come to see some form of transport. And I think I probably recognise that there isn't yet the scalability for a full bus service, but certainly I think just Link Upper Clutha were about to start running their own sort of trial service with a sort of a hop-on, hop-off demand type service. And that was put on hold with the sort of the latest Omicron outbreak. I know we've had discussions with Gary Maloney and through the Transport Governance Group about looking at something like the Timaru trial that ECAN have adopted with that sort of more localised service. And certainly the commentary we hear is that as particularly Hawea grows, we're seeing more of a commuter relationship between that community and Wanaka. So I think, again, there's an opportunity to do some perhaps, least regrets type testing and scenario planning to see what opportunities could be encouraged. Because often my view is, unless you provide something, you don't really know what the true opportunity might be.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mike. Look, and thank you for your submission and probably especially acknowledging the very good work that our natural hazards team's doing. So it is great that that's being acknowledged. Your willingness to collaborate and the support in general for our direction. So thanks very much for that, and we will ensure that your submission is thought through and looked at as we deliberate. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, councillors. Thank you.
And now we have Simon Park.
Good morning. How you going? You can hear me all right?
Yep, got you very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Hey, so I'm here on just behalf of the Tory farmers that submitted in last year's long-term annual plan. And we requested a review of the Tory flood and drainage scheme and the way the rates are calculated. So I believe council agreed to complete that review or start it in December last year. But I understand you've come to a bit of a standoff, which we sort of forewarned you about in our submissions, how you need to be, well, that review needs to be independent. But so yeah, we understand that the staff are refusing to proceed with a review any further. So we did email Sarah Gardner the day before she resigned, request a meeting to understand where we're at. So yeah, we haven't heard anything back. So we are now, well, I'm now here looking for some answers sort of on behalf of the group to work out where we go from here. So that's really the nuts and bolts of why I'm here. Hopefully you can shed some light on it for us.
I will take the lead on that, Mr. Parks. We actually have a group formed that are working through the process of looking at the Tory schemes and the rates on that scheme. I would suggest that possibly the best avenue is for us as a group to take stock of where we're at and have a reasonably quick, in a quick short time frame, a meeting with your group to let you know the progress that we have made and the steps that we are looking to take forward.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because from our point of view, we need this review has got to go ahead. So that's just killing us if it doesn't happen. So we are very motivated to see it happen. So okay.
Yep, that would be happy to do that. Mr. Parks, I have a question from Councillor Wilson. I
appreciate your submission and our acknowledge that we haven't made as much progress as some of us might have liked. Can I just understand, given what some farmers are paying, and the question that you posed is the affordability, there are a number of other issues that we have to take into account. what would be an affordable rate if we haven't done the review in the first instance?
Well, fairness is, we on the East
Yep.
Torres drainage side, we know 16 farmers are paying half the targeted drainage rate, and we've got 15,000, 20,000 people in Mosgiel that do benefit from it, but you just can't say that is fair. So we what is a fair rate? Hey, look, we've all got to pay our fair share, but as councillors, you've got some. We do thank you for the progress we've made today, but you've got a lot on your plate with climate change and all that sort of stuff. And you look at some of the reports that are out there. We are submitting for, or you're requesting a central government report, and then you look at the Tonkin Taylor in plain sight report. It's all acknowledging that the existing ratepayer base can't afford to pay what you want to do. So, but you just can't have that much on 16 people and claim that that's fair and equitable. So, hey, look, if we got it used to be spread across a lot more, but I think the days of when that last review was, well, not that we agreed with the last review, but it made it worse for us. But there is a whole lot of other people out there that benefit from this flood scheme and drainage scheme that other than just us 16 people. And it's the same on the west side. There's 16 people. That's the top 20 titles of rates that are charged pay half the targeted rate. Just as mind-blowingly unfair.
Can I ask one other question?
One question.
The other question is, we've had a submission this morning from Mayor Hawkins, and we got asking that we consider using the flood banks for access way for walking and cycling. That would increase the benefit and therefore potentially the rate distribution, I think. The question I then have is, as farmers, do you see that as being a problem for if that making those flood banks accessible for a general public and then potentially sharing the burden better?
Well, they use it now. They don't ask, they just come. You get horses and all sorts. But hey, look, it's a great spot, and no, I don't have a problem with that. But you look at the one it's the council DCC just approved that Walls Nursery 350 resident lot subdivision type thing. All that water is going to come down to the pump station, which is on my farm. Or some of it might go into the silver stream, but things have changed so much, from the 10 or whatever it was 13 years ago when it was last reviewed. But there is a whole lot more other people that want to use the space, and I've got fishermen coming all the time. They turn up every day because we're all year round fishing. So, like, I don't have a problem with. No, I'm happy to open. Well, the public essentially use it now, so it wouldn't really be any different. There probably would be more people if you advertised it, but
Thank you.
Councillor Deaker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The question to the submitter, you assert that the people of Mosgiel, the property owners there, benefit from the scheme. Given that they are above the flood level of the scheme, how do they directly benefit from it?
Well, you got the banks on the silver stream.
Mm-hmm.
That's all part of the scheme. That was dug and set up to protect Mosgiel. But the scheme was essentially set up, largely to protect the airport. But I could happily live without the airport. I could go elsewhere for a holiday, but and I can live with floods. But there's so much other benefit that comes from the scheme, other than to the handful of people that are paying the lion's share of the rates.
Thank you.
And if I could if it was fair, I'd have to shut up and go away, but it's just not fair.
Any further questions? Mr. Park, thanks for coming on board and taking the time. I will make contact with you directly and talk through and work out a time, if appropriate, to meet with your group.
Yes. Okay, thank you, but the review's got to go ahead.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. That brings to close our public forum. But again, we will take note as we deliberate through on the first and the second, again, slotting those submissions into our process. We go to 3.3, which is confirmation of agenda. Someone moved that well, the agenda, there is no change to the agenda, so I just confirm that I'll move from the chair.
You're not changing the order.
No,
Cool.
no, I'm happy.
Okay. A second.
Second, Councillor Wilson, second. We'll go to all those in favour.
Right.
Just remind you of your duties under conflicts of interest and where to stand aside, and just ensure that process is treated with the respect that should be treated. Thank you. We move to item 5.1, and we have the minutes of 23rd, 24th of February Finance Committee meeting. Could someone move that they be recorded as a true and correct record? Councillor Noon, seconder. Councillor Forbes, all those in favour? We move to item 6, open actions from resolutions of the Finance Committee. Just flicking my page.
Oh, sorry, I've just got a question on that. Oh, no, they'll do it this afternoon, Council.
You mean the actions? Just gonna discuss
Yeah,
them.
any questions on those actions? Well, thank you. We now move on to 7.1, which is our 31st of March 2022 quarterly report, which is our council's activity and performance reports for the nine-month period to the 31st of March. Has been endorsed by Mr. Donnelly, our acting CE and General Manager of Corporate Services, and I presume Nick will have on board Sarah Monroe and Jasmine Lamori.
We don't have Jasmine today. We've got Sarah and Mike. So Mike will cover the statement of service performance piece, and Sarah can cover the other various reports, the finance related reports that she'd prepared.
So if I hand straight over to the team that's presenting, and we'll let their presentation fly through, then we'll see what questions that generates. Thank you. Good morning.
This is the quarterly finance report. It is in the same template that we gave you in Q2. So the first part of the report is the activity performance report, which details our performance against the SSP, the statement of service performance. We then have the activity financial summary, which includes some various tables of any variance in activities that's over 100,000 for revenue, and then there's another table for expenditure. We also have the forecast of what we forecast that activity performance will be at the end of Q4, and the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses, the statement of financial performance, the treasury report, and then a detailed activity financial report. So I'm going to assume that this report is being read, and just if you've got any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Hand straight to the team. Councillor Wilson.
Just asking a question, it's only just because it's been raised now, and you may not know the answer, is we've had it suggested that plan change 8 costs a lot of money. I can't see it in here as an item that may have been greater than budget. And I'm just wondering, do we have those figures? I presume it comes under the governance and engagement. I may have that wrong.
Can I just provide some clarification? We've just actually heard from Federated Farmers.
Yeah.
They were referring to Plan Change 7, not Plan Change 8.
We're talking about plan change. Yeah. Okay, sorry. He said 8. Sorry.
Yeah, no, they've just emailed through this morning. Just
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Then we know those figures, so don't worry. I was surprised, but that's sorry. I have one other question, if I may.
Yeah, so you've got it.
No, I don't need that question answered on plan change 7. We've been given those numbers. And
Yeah, got to go. Thank you. Yes.
The other one's on the expenditure of 2.1 million for the land and water plan science modelling and consultation approaches. Am I correct in believing in the other parts of the paper that's on page 22 of 50? Am I correct in that that is a timing issue or not? I mean, it's going to catch up with the land and water plan timing.
You want me to take that one as well, Sarah?
Yes, I can't actually see where she's referring to. Sorry,
No, that's fine.
Then under the land and water on page 22 of 50.
Yeah, so through the chair, some of that is reflective of the fact that we thought all the modelling would go external and we've been able to do some of it internally. So that's a good news story. Some is staff vacancies and some is timing and we'll catch up, and but there will be an underspend in that science budget at the end of the financial year.
But the science won't be compromised. It's sorry, I'm just in relation to
no, we're doing more than we thought we would, but we've just done more of it in the house.
I'll just point out as well, although in that area, although we're underspent at the end of Q3, our forecast for that area is that we'll still get back largely on budget by the end of next month. So a bit of that was timing. As Anita said, there is still some that would be a little bit underspent because of how it's being done. But because that's the total land and water and there's additional planning costs in there, we've sort of we have some unders and overs, but we're still forecasting that we're largely going to pull that back by the end of this quarter. And in the forecast report, we're showing that area, that spend basically on budget for year end.
Yeah, and it was just tying those two together because it reads differently. Thank you.
Further questions? I'll just throw a couple in, if I may. Page 32. We have $128,000 underspend on integrated catchments. Is that just a timing issue because they appear to be boxing ahead, or is that on ORC staff side of things?
There has been a difference in the timing of the expenditure compared to budget. And so they are forecasted to be caught up in Q4. So it will be just a timing issue.
Any further questions around the table? I'll hold them. Sorry, Councillor Scott, go, Ryan.
Look, yeah, thank you for your report. It's sort of an interesting report to sort of get your head around, to be honest. You've got your colour coding. Is there anything, and you've got your reds and you've identified the reds as not being achieved. Is there anything in particular that we should be concerned about, or as the director or the general manager says, is everything will balance out at year end? Is there anything we should be particularly concerned about? Maybe it's the red ones. Maybe you want to talk us through the red ones, or not.
Well, there's varying degrees of, you know, where things are at. Some things are timing. Some of the red ones, we do have the usual suspects in there with the red ones, like our Lagoima response, and the target's 100% and you miss one, and even though you end up at 99.9%, it's still red because the target was 100. So it's really a matter of if as you go through those, if there's any particular ones that you did want to discuss. But overall, I mean, when I look at it, there's actually a lot of those actual measures and targets are are still being achieved, and although we've got some timing around some of the spend, but the targets, there's still an awful lot that are have either already been achieved or are on track, and then there's still, of course, there is some others that haven't been measured yet, like a lot of the PT ones are only surveyed in the final quarter. So overall, I'd say for the end of the third quarter, there's a significant amount of green, indicating that we're delivering what we set out to do.
Oh, well, thank you for that. In relation, and that needs to be acknowledged, thank you. The land and water, through the chair, I see on one of your pages, what page would it be? I don't know. There's a red in the corner there, complete the land and water regional plan, report to council and proposed management options. So will not be achieved. Is anybody able to talk to that?
So through you, Chair, I can take that one. The reason that's red, Councillor Scott, is because the target was to have 3 completed by the end of the financial year, and because we've pivoted with the way that we're doing it, and we did all of the round 1 consultation at the start together, those FMUs aren't going to be completed at the same time. So we've done all of the round 1 together, and we're doing all of the modelling for round 2 now. So it's just about the way the level of service was set up. It doesn't impact the end goal of notification by 2023, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so how many have we got complete at this point? We've got the Arrow and Cadrona, the Manuhera Care is not yet. What status does that have?
So the Arrow and the Cadrona are complete for water quantity, as you've just said. That's what we've got complete at this point.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Saunders, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Brian, just in relation to your question, I would flag the regulatory space in terms of the financial reporting as a continued challenge. So we are tracking well under in that space, and the expectations on staff to continue to provide that support in light of all of the rule changes and the new consenting types and everything else that's coming through, along with staff training to keep our staff up to speed, is making it very challenging for us to stick to the cost recovery budgets, which is reflected in those financial results. So I would just flag that as something that I think we need to continue to keep an eye on, and how we balance the expectations to provide that service to the community versus a hard line of they will just do their function, which is process consents or monitor consents, and none of the, what would be classed public good. There is a balance there we need to have a look at, because my view is I just don't think it's sustainable in its current form. And I also can't see the sort of end of the line with all these rule changes that are coming through. We've finished with, we're back in the groove with the NES, winter grazing and other things. We've just had Plan Change 8 land, and then we're going to move into land and water plan at the end of 2023. So there are some challenges there for us in terms of our expectations around cost recovery versus rate funded and how we budget for
it. Thank you. Can I follow up?
Yep, certainly, Brian. Yep.
Chair Malcolm. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because I think there are some challenges at this point. And from my perspective as a councillor, one of the key risks is not just the expenditure side, but we're getting all the new staff in place and new commitments and responsibilities. I'm trying to gauge just how effective and efficient we're actually being. So, for example, in the catchment space, Kevin asked a question about integrated catchment. We've got this new staff, we're getting new staff, and just how efficient are we? So is that the next report? Is that the outcomes report, and when would we expect that? It just seems to me we're at a high risk point.
What outcome? We do have the strategy team is looking at wanting to measure, the outcomes that we've got outlined in the LTP. So that piece of work is still going, but to a large extent, you'd still be able to determine yourself, the effectiveness and efficiency of, the work that we're doing in the catchment space, for example, because, with your involvement in those groups in the community. But again, some of those outcomes, you're really going to see them come to fruition over the long term. So what we measure in the statement of service performance is still around, are we actually continuing to do that work that we set out to do?
Yeah.
And then, we and you as councillors who are involved in those groups would be gauging how effective that is. I mean, I think one of the things you just heard from Fed Farmers was that, they actually, although they mentioned they wanted less rates in the annual plan, they actually encouraged more investment in the catchment group space. So, and they probably mentioned that it was they find that that type of activity we're doing effective. So that's sort of the measure that we've got there. We don't, if you like, have a specific measure in any of these measures and targets that outlines that effectiveness, but we are getting that feedback that it seems to be supported and effective in the community's minds.
Well, can I follow on?
Yeah, certainly.
Because it's, that's a really interesting example, and we've got Dr. Palmer here, and he may wish to comment. But like the catchment space, on one side, you've got the rural initiated, Otago catchment community, and who are building up steam, and we fund them. We've got a funding agreement. It's one of our agenda items, and that's really exciting, long term. And they're getting out and about, but they're going through a bit of a learning curve too. And then you've got the ORC, where the ORC are putting in catchment people as well. They're also putting in FMU people as well. And how all that sort of meshes and works together to get positive outcomes is like more than just a financial thing. So when federated farmers say, it's good the catchment space, which part of that jigsaw are they talking about? And how is it all meshing in terms of biodiversity improvements and water quality improvements is not that straightforward. Maybe maybe it's time will tell, because we're at the start of that curve. It's a really exciting time, but it's also a really I hope we're doing it right time.
Would you comment, Dr. Palmer?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I think this question of Councillor Scott's is best addressed in the environmental implementation update that we're bringing to Implementation Committee on the 9th of June, which will be the right platform for that.
Okay, and that's a fair
discussion, I think.
Yeah.
And I'll just have one more question myself on, and again, it's around the education approach that we've had very positive feedback from, and probably to you, Mr. Saunders, where it says, one of the things Fed Farmers said, it would be really good to measure the effectiveness of that education as an approach to avoid action, where we say on page 21 that revenue from enforcement activities is under despite increased work in that area. And I just wonder where there is a direct correlation between the good work you're doing with education and avoiding that final hammer.
No, we're actually taking more action than we ever have, and that'll come up in the quarterly report. Regulatory Tammy's got some data in there, so the processes we're running now to issue formal notices are far more efficient than they've ever been. So the number of notices going out the door is significantly higher than it was. The issue with the budgeting is what we effectively budget for, particularly prosecution revenue, which is a very difficult thing to budget because we never know when we're going to go through that process. We never know when we're getting a court decision, et cetera, et cetera. So we do look at that year on year with the finance team at annual plan and just try and make sure that number reflects what might happen in reality. But I think I mean, my assessment of is that we were very light in both areas previously, both education and formal action. We're seeing an increase in formal action because of the good work of the team and the processes Tammy's put in. And I would hope that we will also see some benefits in the education space, but I would probably say that's going to be a difficult thing to measure. We need to have a think about how we do that.
Thanks very much. And so, yeah, staff are clearly busy doing the complete role, which is very encouraging to hear. Any further questions? Councillor Wilson?
Just on that case, just wondering about the education one. Is it something that we need to measure, or is it something that the catchment groups could measure on your behalf? And that could be the interaction with catchment groups, because that's often where the education will be interfacing. So attendance and participation in things that are driven from education.
Well, there's two things: is you know, are we just measuring who attends and who takes notice, or are we measuring the outcomes on the ground? Because they're two different things. So, you know, I think we need to have a bit of a think about it, and I'm sure there's a number of opportunities to contribute to the overall measurement, but we just got to be clear about what it is we're measuring.
Thank you. Councillor Deaker?
Thanks, Kevin. Richard, you said more than ever before there's notices going out the door. What does that mean, and what's the reason for it?
I'll defer that, Michael, to the regulatory committee where we've got that report and the details for those notices, if that's okay. So that's later in June.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Any further questions around the table? I'm not hog at all. I was probably just, look, I've got one on buses. And that's on page 35, where we see our transport revenue is down 4.42 million. So I'm just wondering, what is our rationale at the end of the year, and how do we get that for, if we haven't increased patronage, we haven't reduced that deficit, what's our mechanism for the next 12 months to rectify that, and where do we get that money from?
I'll take that one. I think which page were you?
Yeah, there's two on buses. I might have picked the wrong one, but there was a transport showing a deficit of 4.42 million. That might actually be the forecast. Sorry.
Yeah, but because I was going to say that it's probably I'll just find it. It's probably better to go to the forecast page, which I'll just find it. Because transport is one of the areas where, if you look at the year to date, we're actually down in revenue, but we're down in cost as well. Because there's a few reasons why the revenue is down. One is because we have had periods of running less service. So when we run less service, that means we've got a corresponding decrease in cost. So some of that has been dealt with by revenue's down, but cost is down as well. But there is still the issue that revenue itself is down because we've got just lower patronage, and then we're running the $2 fares, and then we've had the half price fares kick in as well that we've got at the moment. Although obviously Waka Kotahi is funding that. So what we tend to look at is, you need to look at both the revenue and the costs together. And if you have a look on the forecast page, which is on page 35 out of the 50 page of the agenda, you can see both of the public transport networks. The revenue is forecast to be down almost 2 million under budget in each network. But then in the expenditure side, we've got 1.5 million under in Dunedin and 1.1 million in Wakatipu. So overall, both of those networks, although we're going to be almost 4 million down on revenue, the actual impact that goes through to the deficit position is pulled back by the expenditure being under as well. But we're still forecasting there that our deficit is going to be, basically $500,000 worse in each of those two networks. So that will flow through to the year-end reserve position. And then ultimately that is, a deficit that will have to be recovered, over future years. Now, the issue that we've really got is then beyond this is, particularly with running the $2 fares and the impact of that, is that revenue is likely to continue to be significantly below what we've been putting in the LTP. And, are we now going to see, deficits building up at that sort of level, $500,000 per network over the next couple of years? And in which case the deficits that we've previously provided, and we provided those for the LTP through to council, showing where the two networks deficits were going to peak at about year 4. Those, if we continue with the lower fare revenue, then we will end up with higher deficits. Because apart from fare revenue, the only other place the revenue comes from is Waka Kotahi funding their share and then targeted rates. And of course, there's always an issue around Waka Kotahi where they're currently funding the half price fare initiative. They weren't funding our ongoing drop to the $2 fares fully in the first place. So we were wearing more of that cost through the reserve deficit, and ultimately that puts the burden on future targeted rates.
Thank you, Nick. Any further questions? Any further comment yourself, Mr. Donnelly, or your staff want to make on the report? Everyone comfortable? So if we go back, I'm just sorry, I just need to flip back a page. We have a recommendation. Close. A moment, please. This is going to show me how to get back to my page quicker before I do my next. Yeah, I've got it. Thanks for your assistance, Councillor Keller. We have a recommendation on page 13. Would someone care to move in that direction? Councillor Noon, seconded Councillor Kelleher. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Moving on. We now go to 8.1. We have the recommendations from the Audit and Risk Subcommittee meeting on the 24th. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Have you got those?
I'm happy to move. I'm not sure that they are recommendations. They're more, but this is a conversation about where they're more noting of the resolutions. But this has been pedantic and it's something we need to probably cover in our terms of reference. So I'm happy as is in the meantime.
And seconded, Councillor, those in favour?
Aye.
8.2.
So what page are we on?
Oh, sorry, well, we were on 46, now we're on 47.
Thank you.
I'd like to see you doing that because that's my method as well. And we
go
need
to the agenda, it's much quicker.
We need to improve. Thanks, Ron. I feel better.
I'm happy to do that.
Moved by Councillor Keller, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Those in favour?
Aye.
Then we go to council to item 9, which we, for the various reasons outlined, we need to go into publicly excluded. So I have a mover on that, Councillor Wilson, seconder. Councillor Forbes, those in favour. At this stage, I will close the public stage of the meeting. We'll just